नमस्कार दर्शक मित्रों। थिंकलाइन के आज के संस्करण में आपका स्वागत है। आज हम बात करने जा रहे हैं यूएस के अंदर जो हो रहा है वो टर्मोइल के बारे में। आफ्टर लास्ट सैटरडेज assassination bid on President Trump, it looks like we are a better democracy in India than US because they are totally intolerant. The sequence of event all of you must have known. आप सबको पता चल ही गया कि क्या हुआ क्या नहीं हुआ। एक 20 साल का बच्चा ही कहूंगा मैं भारत के हिसाब से, तो वहां पर फियर्सली इंडिपेंडेंट, अ लोनर, जैसे अ लोन वुल्फ अटैक, दैट इज व्हाट सम पीपल आर ट्राइंग टू प्रोजेक्ट। ऑल दिस थिंग्स हैपन, पीपल आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इट, बट एक्चुअली द प्रॉब्लम इज इन सिस्टम. What's been happening to US culture? What's happening? Where are they? Is the division in the society so fierce that they are up to killing each other? And I will not be surprised. मुझे तो कोई ताज्जुब नहीं होगा। हमारे मेहमान डॉक्टर आदित्यन जी एक्सपर्ट है, यहाँ पर वहां पर यूएस में ही है, वो बताएंगे हमें कि हकीकत क्या है और क्या हो सकता है। मैं तो ये मानता हूं बड़ी स्पष्ट तरीके से, दिस इज नॉट द फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट बिफोर द elections take place. There'll be some more of this sort of nonsense happening because US society seem to have gone thoroughly wrong with basic values, and what can happen? Will US lose its position in the world, which will not happen right now? But then there is always that question, is it a declining superpower? Well, could be, could not. What can Trump do if he comes back to power? Because after this attempt, there is always that fence-sitting voter who will go Trump's way with the sympathy. It can happen. Because that happens in India, and that can happen even in the US. Because people are the same everywhere. If you see the human psychology. In all these things, and related, I have a few questions. I'll keep on asking Dr. Adityanjee as we progress. And before I yield him the floor, I would have the first question. Sir, was it a lone wolf attack, or there is a definite connection somewhere down the line, or he was motivated to an extent that he goes on to kill someone, attempts to go and kill someone? Sir.
So there are a number of theories, and they are competing with each other. What is the truth? Time will tell. We still don't know the exact truth about assassination of John F. Kennedy. So certain things are too complex or too deeply involved to ascertain the truth. There are 4 or 5 different competing theories. So you did mention the lone wolf attack. There's a possibility, theoretical, I'm not saying, and I'm just speaking as an analyst, so I'm not going to give credence to one over the other. I'm going to discuss all the possibilities. There's a possibility, some people will say it was a stage-managed attack. Remember Sanjay Gandhi before 1977 elections? If the memory goes down, he lost the election, but prior to polling, there was quote unquote an attack on him, murderous attack with the gun. Nothing came out. So it could be stage managed. The other extreme theory is that Democrat Party did it. These are competing theories. Lone wolf attack, a crazy person. There's no shortage of crazy persons in the United States. When you have easy access to guns, assault rifles, assault weapons, and pretty much all the states have now legalized marijuana. So you may be high on something, and then you have assault type weapons. So the freedoms given by the society do encourage lone wolf attacks. There's also a theory going on that the quote unquote deep state is involved, because deep state wants to eliminate a particular political candidate. There are a couple of other angles that one must explore. On January 3rd, 2020, a drone attack was made on Iraqi airspace, and an Iranian general, chief of the Al-Quds Force, which is the external agency of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Qasem Soleimani, was assassinated. It is alleged that it was done by the United States. Donald Trump was the president at that point in time. There was an arrest warrant for Donald Trump in Iran. If he ever sets foot in Iran, he is subject to arrest and possible death sentence. So there is some suggestion that Iranian intelligence agencies might arrange an assassination attempt on US soil.
Mhm.
Also, very far-fetched possibility. I'm not saying that is true. Donald Trump, in his 4 years of presidency, did put a number of financial sanctions on communist China. And a possible second term will not be palatable to communist China. So one has to sift through all these things. What is the truth? You and I probably will never know. There are some allegations that he could not have done this single-handedly. 20-year-old kid. Maybe there was a second shooter. There is some talk in the press about forensic analysis of sound bursts. And they suggest that there were 3 distinct sound bursts. I think first 3 were from weapon A, which possibly belonged to the shooter. And then the next 5 sound bursts belong to weapon B, which is attributed to the snipers who took the person out. And then there is a sound burst, possibly from weapon C, and nobody knows who does it belong to. So there are speculations that, there were other people involved. This kid had taken day off from work. He did preparation for 48 hours before this. He purchased 58 rounds of ammunition. He purchased a 5-foot ladder from Home Depot, apparently to climb to the roof. There were 2 explosive devices found in his Hyundai Sonata. The 3rd explosive device was found in his home. And in his pocket, a transmitter was found, which could be used to detonate these explosive devices. So he had some plan B also. So these are the facts that are coming. His cell phone, the iPhone, has been now unlocked by the FBI.
Mhm.
And apparently reports do not suggest anything unusual in that. There's one very unusual thing, that this boy was used in an advertisement.
Yes.
By a security agency called BlackRock, which is a private security agency. These are mercenaries that will go and fight for money everywhere. They served the US government in Iraq and Syria and all that sort of thing. One would wonder why a 20-year-old kid would be in an advertisement with BlackRock. That raises questions because BlackRock is involved with quote unquote deep state agencies.
सर अभी अभी मैं लोगों को हिंदी में बता देता हूँ, ये जो ब्लैक रॉक नाम आ रहा है ना, that governs about 40% of the world deep state, if I'm not wrong. That is what the figures suggest. और ब्लैक रॉक के एक एडवर्टीजमेंट में ये बच्चा फीचर हुआ. सर कंटिन्यू.
So as I said, there are competing theories. Who is responsible? What is the situation? In your introduction, you raised a number of issues. One issue is the United States a declined superpower. Actually, I am, through Council for Strategic Affairs, conducting a panel discussion on this topic on Saturday. Is the United States a declining superpower? So that is a separate issue. But the divisions in US society, they are very obvious. They are very obvious. There's a polarization. There's a deep polarization. It's not just political polarization. It is ethnic polarization. It is religious polarization. It is class-based polarization. So there are multiple processes of polarization happening in the society. So it is no longer a happy melting pot. Traditionally, it was called United States the melting pot. You know, you melt into that, you subsume your identities. Now everything is governed by identity politics. And second to identity politics is called vote bank politics in India. So you can understand what is happening. Now let's talk about democracy. I remember in 1970s and 1980s, New York Times correspondents, India correspondents, Barbara Crossett, would write, India is a rogue democracy. More recently, the words that have been used is India is a flawed democracy. India is a majoritarian, authoritarianism democracy, whatever it is. What is the hallmark of a democracy? It is government for the people, by the people, of the people. But there's one important tenet of a democracy. Everybody is equal, and each person has a single vote. Nobody has a veto in democracy. One person, one vote system. Now, if you judge United States by that standard, one person, one vote, it has been an absolutely flawed democracy from 1776 onwards. Because a president is not elected by majority of the vote. It's by smoke-filled backrooms. It is just, you know, the electoral college. The similarity of electoral college is with the collegium system. You don't know what is happening. It's a black hole. And there are attempts to manipulate the electoral college. It happened in 2020. Attempts were made to manipulate. Now, yes, Mr. Trump won the 2016 election, but he lost the popular votes by 5 million. But he maneuvered in such a way that a small number of small states where you could get a majority of 10,000 votes, 4 or 5 such crucial states, and you win the electoral college. So it is a flawed democracy. What was okay in 1776 should not be gospel for 2024. This is a deeply flawed democracy that needs introspection and systemic reforms if the democracy is to survive. Otherwise, one candidate or the other candidate will continue to manipulate it. The polarization, the extreme polarization and political violence we are seeing is nothing new. over the last almost 10 years, we have seen a lot of political violence. I must say that, yes, there is sympathy for Mr. Trump, but elections are 4 months away. And in politics, 1 week is too long a time. In 2016, everybody thought that Hillary Clinton will win the election.
Yes.
What happened? 10 days before elections, the FBI chief, who was a Republican and was a Republican appointee, James Comey, comes out that we found some objectionable emails again from Hillary Clinton from a different laptop. So we are reopening an investigation. And then 3 or 4 days before the elections, the same Mr. Comey comes and says, we have investigated these emails, everything is kosher. But the damage was done. What Mr. James Comey refused to notify the public at large that his agency was conducting a simultaneous investigation on Mr. Trump that was kept hidden from public eye.
Yes.
So you see manipulation going on. Generally, it is said in United States that, a few weeks before the May presidential election, you don't do any these kind of things, but he did. His initial investigation was over in June, in which he decided not to charge Hillary Clinton. But come last week of October, he comes back again. Prior to that, during Obama's presidency, specifically before the second term, Mr. Trump raised the bogey of Obama being a foreign citizen, not being born in United States, hence not qualified to be the president of United States. There was a whole movement called birther movement, that it's a lie that he was born in Hawaii. Based totally packed on lies. So I'm telling you how the political divisions, the societal divisions, the identity politics, the insinuations that Obama was black were made. By whom? Mr. Trump, who was bankrolling this birther movement. In 2016, in Mr. Trump's political rallies, there were chants, lock her up, lock her up. Lock whom up? Hillary Clinton. And there were violent incidents in which Mr. Trump openly said, his supporters in the rallies, if somebody heckled or whatever, to throw this guy out or beat this guy out, and I'll pay for your legal expenses. This was the presidential candidate Trump in his election rallies prior to 2016 elections. Now we know that former Defense Secretary Mike Esper, who served Mr. Trump in his administration and was kicked out, fired by Mr. Trump, said that Mr. Trump wanted to use United States Army for firing at civilian protesters. In US, the army is kept only for external this thing. They are never called for internal duties, unlike India. So there has been violence, there has been talk of violence, there has been political violence. There is nothing new. And everybody should remember what happened on January 6th, when Mr. Trump instigated a bunch of hoodlums and chants were made, hang Mike Pence. Who was Mike Pence? The then vice president. Why they wanted to hang him? Because he would not cooperate in Mr. Trump's machinations in not certifying the result of a valid presidential election. So there's nothing new that in 2024, suddenly a 20-year-old kid comes out and makes an assassination attempt on Mr. Trump. The fact of the matter is that there's gradual escalation of internal divisions, internal confrontations in US civic polity. Although in a democracy, you don't settle differences by bullets. That is done by terrorists. We always say the choice is between bullet and ballot. But what we have seen January 6th, preceding that and following that, is clear-cut rhetoric of violence by all candidates and all parties in United States. It's not a happy situation. Yes, it looks like temporarily this attempted assassination of Mr. Trump is giving him higher ratings, possibility of winning the election out of sympathy. You know what happened in 1984 in India in Lok Sabha elections after Indira Gandhi's assassination. You also know what happened in 1991 in India in Lok Sabha election, when the multi-phase election in between the major party president is assassinated. The party that was losing came back from behind because the system allowed that sympathy wave by delaying, postponing the elections. So that sympathy wave will definitely help Mr. Trump. Having said that, politics, 1 week is too long a time. Elections are 4 months away. As yet, we don't know if Mr. Biden would be Democrat nominee. Democrat Party is undergoing internal implosion. In fact, there is a movement to fire Biden as the Democrat candidate. And they are washing their dirty linen in public. They should be consolidating behind their candidate. The irony is that in this world's hyperpower, only superpower, the most exalted democracy, you have two contrasting visions. One party's candidate is cognitively impaired, suffering from clear-cut dementia, cannot even, hold his facts or his sentences together and gets confused. On the other side, you have a convicted felon.
Convicted.
Convicted, so far, yes, convicted felon. Also, in one of the civil cases, the judge said he did molest a columnist some 20, 30 years ago. And I think there's a $86 million judgment against him. This tells you what are the choices in this exalted democracy of the reigning superpower of the world.
So what about his President Trump's running mate for the vice presidency?
Well, pretty boy. I think it is an attempt to balance the ticket because criticism is that there are two old white men.
Yes.
So if you don't want to select an old white man, you will select a young white man.
Yeah, almost half the age, little less than half the age.
39 years old.
Yes.
The problem is that same person in 2016 called Trump as America's Hitler. And the worst thing that could happen to United States is if Mr. Trump becomes a president. That is what J.D. Vance said. But of course, in India, you have Ayarams and Gayarams, and you have Paltu Chachas. So you have Paltu Chachas or Paltu Bhatijas, like J.D. Vance.
But his recent addresses bear nothing about this. They are, in fact, more leaning towards the right side than anything else. And highly right side, is he trying to balance military and the civic society or something like that, in the US society?
Well, he had 3 or 4 candidates who were vetted deeply for vice presidential slot. One of them was a senator from one of the Senator, Tim Scott, I believe, was his name. Other was Marco Rubio. And then another one was a governor, Burgum. Now, with Marco Rubio, he is a senator from the same state as Mr. Trump comes. And there's a law that both candidates, presidential and vice presidential, cannot be from the same state. If you insist on being the voters actually from the same state, they will lose the electoral college votes of that particular state. So if he had chosen Marco Rubio, and the attraction Marco Rubio brings is A, a lot of legislative experience, B, Hispanic votes, which are very strong. Problems, Marco Rubio is a registered voter and senator from Florida. So A, he has to change his registration from Florida to some other state. And if he is registered in some other state, he cannot be senator from Florida. So he has to resign his Senate position from Florida. So that was a major issue. With Governor Burgum, the problem was that he recently passed a very harsh anti-abortion law.
Yes.
Now, if you choose this person as a candidate, then women will not vote for you. So that put him out. And J.D. Vance was one of the candidates, so no baggage about, the registration or anything like that. But J.D. Vance was elected senator less than 2 years ago. He's only 39 years old.
Yes.
Does not have any executive experience, much to talk about legislative experience. So let's say in a hypothetical scenario, Mr. Trump becomes the president and J.D. Vance becomes the vice president. And let's say by an act of God, Trump departs. Act of God, I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying any terror attack or anything like that. The guy is old. Anything can happen. You can have heart attack, you can have stroke, whatever. So by law, J.D. Vance becomes president. How can you trust a 39-year-old kid, who has not even been mayor of a city? Executive experience, presidentship of this superpower. So there are questions, You can have a pretty boy. We know one pretty boy was Dan Quayle. George H.W. Bush selected him against to balance the age with the youth and pretty looks. And Dan Quayle was a disaster. So just because somebody is youthful should not be the...
So let's talk about the other side for a while. You talked about Republicans. Now let's talk about Democrats. There is a lot of churning, there's a lot of talk that Biden will be replaced. Who could that be?
Well, first thing is that Democrat Party is going through a suicidal mode. Time to act was 2 years ago. First, you hide the fact that the president is cognitively impaired. Dementia does not develop overnight. He has been making, gaps like this over a period of time, but in a very close stage managed appearances, TV appearances, you hide the fact. There was a time in primaries to challenge him. You discourage all that. The Democrat, the party, mandarins, or the, high command, or whatever you may say. That was the time to challenge him. When he came, he said, I am just a transitional person because I want to beat Donald Trump and I will hand over the torch to a younger person. That didn't happen. And now you're seeing the results. So number of members of the House, a number of senators, a number of candidates now are having second thoughts. So there are groups vying for power. There's no mechanism that once you have selected a candidate, you can unseat him. What rationale will you give? The Democrat convention is going to be in August. By that time, most of the states would have certified people who are on the ballot. If you say that we will challenge this in the convention, there will be a bloody fight. Everybody would want to be, and these candidates will not have any funding. So it's a total mess. I think if I were advising them, I'll say stick with the demented guy. Because at least he has name recognition, he has some money, he has an apparatus, and just wait for what happens. If there's an act of God and he dies because of some medical condition, you have a vice president who will take over by law. But at least you have a shot of winning. Now they are panicking. They say that you cannot win with Biden. The point is that you select any other candidate that is going to lose because it's so late. The early voting actually in some states starts in September.
Oh.
And if the convention, the election day is the first Tuesday of November, but now post-COVID, all the states have allowed early voting by mail. So in some states, early voting is going to start in September. So how do you third week of August, you have the Democrat convention, you have a floor fight on which somehow you can find another candidate because there's no other mechanism. So nobody should envy the position of the Democrat Party. At least compared to Democrat Party, it looks like that the Republican Party has now consolidated behind Trump. There are some never-Trumpers who have been kicked out of Republican Party. The Republican Party is not the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan. This is the Republican Party which is transformed into MAGA party or mega party, that is what they say, Make America Great Again, which is extremely rightist, does not believe in the original conservative principles because Mr. Trump was never a Republican. He hijacked the party. And now these people are stuck with him. So it tells you the depths of the, woes of the US democracy. Both parties are flawed, both candidates are flawed. Unfortunately, system is that it is two-party system. There are other candidates, but they are just like, for creating some nuisance kind of thing. There is this candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's an independent candidate, but he's not there on slate in all the states. I mean, if your name does not come in all the states, you have no way of, you may get like 10% of the vote, 5% of the vote, you may act as a spoiler. Then there's a guy called Cornel West who will probably get 2% of the votes. There's Jill Stein of the Greens. She'll get maybe 3 or 4% of the votes. These are also Rands who have like ego issue. They know they have
No chance.
no chance, but they will compete in the presidency, essentially disturbing the situation between these two major candidates. All these alternative third-party candidates, they never build the local level parties. They never come at the state level or local level politics, mayors or whatever, or legislative assembly. That's the way to build up the party from bottom to up. And parties come and parties go. We understand that. You know, but there we are in a flawed system.
This brings me to the last question of today's discussion. What next for USA? Whoever wins, because sitting here in Bharat, we look at it, Biden comes, no problem, this will continue. The chaos will continue, the opportunities for Bharat will rise. Trump comes, he will delay a little, but still there will be huge chaos. So for us, it doesn't make a difference either the Democrats win or Republican win. Bharat's continuation of having, this sweet sour relationship with US is going to continue. And my question basically is, sir, how do you look at it sitting over there? That what should be beneficial for India?
So I will just make some broad comments. Since 2000 year onwards, India-US relationship has steadily progressed, irrespective of who is in power in United States and who is in power in India. So that has been the broad trend. There's broadening of relationship. We are not in 1971 era when 7th Fleet is sent.
Yes.
There is definitely more warmth, more exchanges, more strategic partnership, more import of arms by India. So overall, there is warming of relations. Is everything hunky-dory? No, it has not been. The general trend is that the relationship gets good when a Republican president is there. And the relationship suffers when Democrat is a president because they bring extraneous issues, part of the liberal ecosystem. I don't want to say. So that has been the thing. And since Mr. Biden came to power, we saw that, lecturing to India. India is a xenophobic country. What Eric Garcetti is doing, sitting in India as ambassador, giving lectures or whatever. So we have problems in terms of bilateral relationship. But why should India bother about United States? India is a rising country, a rising economy. Yes, some of the US policies do make a difference, but it would be the innate strength of Indian state, Indian nationhood. That will determine the trajectory of India, not XYZ sitting in White House. So, and mind you, these elections are meant for US,
Yes.
not for India.
But they created a lot of disturbance in our elections. Would we pay them back?
I don't think, as I told you what is going on, this is a deeply flawed democracy. Focus on building India's economy, and don't focus on United States, because India has come to this stature despite United States, despite sanctions, multiple layers of sanctions, not just once, over a period of time. So I have written about doctrine of Indian exceptionalism. India is a civilizational country. United States is a very new country. Yes, they are big, they are superpower now, but they don't have that historical depth as a nation. And they do all kinds of stupid things, like spending $3 trillion in 20 years to take power from Taliban in Afghanistan, to return back power to Taliban after that, and leaving $85 billion worth of hardware, military hardware. So if you do stupid things like this, ultimately it is going to not only affect your credibility, but your strength also. And that is what is happening, that gradually United States is weakening. It's not going to disappear like Soviet Union. It is going to be there maybe for another 100 years, but the fundamentals are declining. Yes, you control the dollar, which is the reserve currency. You can print as many dollars you want by quantitative easing. So you can manipulate the system. But United States is under debt. Trillions of dollars under debt. So despite the
35 trillion to
resilience,
be present.
pardon?
35 trillion to be present.
Yes, is more than the economy, the GDP. So why should India bother about it interfering in this system? Just focus on building your strength and leave US to its own devices. Ultimately, each country decides its own course, its own fate. And US is going on a path which is not very good.
How much does this, left liberando Wahhabi cabals have caused damage to the US society?
I would say quite a lot. There are extreme visions, both the parties, Democrat Party, extreme leftist, who are always in bed with jihadi elements. So all the universities were having these demonstrations, justifying rape as resistance and glorifying Hamas, glorifying the terrorist attacks on Israel, things like that. Similarly, there are a lot of extreme things that are being done. In state of California, the parents cannot, choose how their children are to be raised.
Yes.
The child's legal gender may be changed by the school, and parents may have no say on this. So why would anybody like to raise children in California? On the other hand, if you look at the Republican, they are ultra-rightists. They say, all quote-unquote foreigners, which means non-white people, should be deported. And they want, it's a secular state, but they want Christian fundamentalism. So there are problems with both the extremes. There's hardly any middle ground in the parties. And what happens that depending upon the situation, the independent voters, which are now a majority in US, both parties are minority party. If you see the voter registration, independents decide, they swing from one extreme to the other extreme depending on the situation. Ultimately, the polarization is equal, hard left, hard right. And it's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for disaster, and you're seeing this in political violence. There's no reason why Mr. Trump, as a major political candidate, should have been a target of this 20-year-old kid. But the same candidate himself had justified violence. Yeah. So
दर्शक मित्रों, आपने बड़ी बात सुन ली। ये क्या हो रहा है यूएस सोसाइटी में? तो बहुत खुश होने की जरूरत नहीं है। एवरीथिंग फ्रॉम यूएस इज गुड, डोंट बिलीव दैट। यूएस में सब कुछ सही नहीं चल रहा है। वहां की संस्कृति, वहां के लोग, वहां का कल्चर बदल रहा। और जैसे डॉक्टर आदित्यन जी ने बताया, एक तरफ एक्सट्रीम लेफ्ट है, एक तरफ एक्सट्रीम राइट है, और दो के बीच में इंसान फंस जाता है, पीस जाता है, और आपको हिंसा की वारदातें दिखती है। तो मित्रों, जाने से पहले तो मैं आपको फिर से वो अपील करूंगा, प्लीज लाइक, शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइबर्स। आपका थोड़ा सा कंट्रीब्यूशन हमारे लिए बहुत बड़ा हो सकता है। डिस्क्रिप्शन, सब नीचे डिस्क्रिप्शन में सब कुछ दिया गया है। क्यूआर कोड है, सुपर चैट, सुपर स्टिकर, आप जो चाहे वो कर सकते हैं। प्लीज ट्राई एंड हेल्प अस, एंड प्लीज डोंट फॉरगेट टू कमेंट ऑन आवर वीडियोस। Exactly what do you feel about the content? Please let us know. And before we end this video, sir, one last summation in a minute or two, and then we'll close it. What do you think this US society will be after, let's say, another 20 years?
I think I am not in the habit of political astrology.
No, just
by,
what you see in the what you see
by
in the society.
being a forecaster. But the trends are that this society is declining. The amount of crime, we talk about any minor incident happens in India, it's made an issue. In US, there are practices that press does not want to talk about. There's child labor. There's human or person trafficking. The extreme violence, the drug dealers and gun-related violence. And one thing that nobody wants to talk about is crime against women. In United States, a girl can be kidnapped from a shopping mall, taken across straight lines, and trafficked for various reasons, for various activities. Killed, murdered. The body will be found after 2-3 years or whatever. Nobody makes an issue. In India, something happens, the Prime Minister must resign. Does not matter where it happened. Yes, things do happen. These are not nice things that should happen. But if you see the statistics, the incidents per 100,000 of rapes, United States is far, far above India. Actually, there are not many countries, but the Western press demonizes India by magnifying anything very small, make it a mountain out of molehill. You remember during COVID second wave, there's some dead bodies floating in river, and documentaries were made by BBC and other photographers, some of Indian origin also. Sitting here, I saw piles of dead bodies in nursing homes because they lacked capacity to do burial. Some of the storage rooms in nursing homes were converted into cold storage so that dead bodies could lie there because there was no mechanism to deal with these dead bodies during COVID time. But the press will not talk about it. So this wonderful society, which used to be very prosperous, which believed in work ethics, is slowly transforming. More than 15 years ago, a presidential candidate said that 47% of the people do not pay taxes in the United States. 47%. And that was in 2012 elections, Mitt Romney said in a fundraiser. The number of people who are on disability continues to rise. The external debt continues to mount. They keep on printing the dollars. The social cohesion is gone. Crime is there, but it's not talked about because it has become normative phenomenon. So by all indicators, it's a society in decline.
Society in decline, as Dr. Adityanjee says, US society in decline. That is the essence of today's. मित्रों, जाने से पहले फिर एक बार please like, share and subscribe us. We thank profusely Dr. Adityanjee to take the time out and talk to us about USA insights. We'll meet you again in some other program. फिर से मिलेंगे, sir.
Can I give one more comment?
Yes, please do that.
People in India have very great fascination with any Indian American on the ticket. So Kamala Devi Harris, although she is strictly not Indian American. She is Indian Jamaican American. So there's a dilution of identity. Similarly, there's a great fascination with J.D. Vance's wife,
Right. Yes. Hindu.
Usha Chilikuri. It has nothing to do with India. Anybody who is here, who has accepted the citizenship or is citizen by birth, has nothing Indian in them. Don't
Yes.
think that they will favor in policy matters. Your fascination is unnecessary, unjustified. Get real. These people are US citizens, they are patriotic Americans, and they are going to deal with the policies of United States. They have nothing to do with India. So don't gloat over it.
दर्शक मित्रों, आपने बहुत बहुत सीधा सुना। वहां पर कोई इंडियन ओरिजिन वाला होता है सत्ता के अंदर तो हम समझ बैठते हैं कि हमें फेवर होगा, नहीं होता है। ऐसे ऐसा कहीं नहीं होता है, और ये बात हमें समझने की जरूरत है। दैट्स रियलिटी, हार्श रियलिटी ऑफ लाइफ। तो मित्रों, आज के लिए इतना ही बस। फिर से मिलेंगे। डॉक्टर आदित्य जी का हम बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करते हैं। थैंक यू सर सो मच, एंड मीट यू अगेन। जय हिंद, जय भारत।
My pleasure.